This is Ethan, and I'm here with Dave, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 5-inch.
On this episode, we interview Scott O'Neill, Red Rock Amphitheater's conductor and orchestrator for the Strings Attached tour.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al.
Hey, everyone. Listen up. Your attention, if you please. Really want to give you a warning, because I found out this morning that this episode contains some spoilers about the Strings Attached tour, particularly some of the songs that Al and his band will be playing at the shows. So if you don't want to listen to any spoilers, there's some great things you can do. You could always translate your documents into Swahili. You could make your TV record Geely. You could always neuter your pets, or maybe just give your laundry static cling.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch.
If you do accidentally listen to the rest of this episode and you really didn't want to, my best advice is just turn off your computer. Make sure it powers down and drop it in a 2,000-inch hole in the ground and bury it completely. Rocks and boulders should be fine. And then just burn all the clothes you may have worn during the listening period. That's my best advice for you. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird
Dave
Al.
and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Hello, this is Plankton. Dave and Ethan's 2,000-inch Weird Al podcast is coming at you, unless I destroy it, which I probably will. Yeah.
We are here with Scott O'Neill, conductor and the gentleman who wrote the orchestration for Weird Al's latest tour, Strings Attached.
We're so excited to have you on, Scott. Thank you for chatting with us.
Thanks. It's an honor.
An honor to be on our podcast or working with Al.
Yeah. I'm learning. Everything that Al Yankovic does has a certain, polish and quality to it. So I'm expecting the same from you guys. So yeah, it is an honor.
Well, thank you. So, we definitely want to talk about everything you did with Al, but I would love if you can give our listeners just a kind of an overview of what you do and your career.
Oh, I started out mainly as a performer, as a conductor and a pianist, and it's kind of grown into lots of kind of offshoots. If you're going to be a conductor, you're going to do lots of different things. So the three that I've kind of focused on in this part of my career, I'm doing like classical educational spots for Colorado Public Radio. I'm still conducting a lot, and it's turned out that I'm doing a lot of orchestration these days with pretty wide diversity of folks. So that's pretty much where I'm at now.
So besides Al, who else are you working with?
I wrote recently I did orchestrations for Ingrid Michaelson's Christmas album. I've worked with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones a lot.
Cool.
I'm actually about to do a concert with them next week. About 5 of the tunes I orchestrated. Of course, he writes a lot of his own stuff. But Al's kind of the last thing of the summer, but I'm also orchestrating Tenacious D's live show. So
Wow.
That's awesome.
Kind of a wide variety there, from pop to bluegrass, funk to the kind of humor element, right?
I mean, working with both Al and Tenacious D, that you're essentially crossing off the top 2 comedy music acts of all time. They're kind
of a big deal, right?
You're gonna be the go-to guy when comedy music wants to orchestrate. They're like, well, who else has worked with Al and Tenacious D?
Hey, Scott O'Neill's your man.
Yeah. Wow. So
I feel fortunate.
how do you fill that niche? How do you get to work with Al and Tenacious D? What are the circumstances behind that?
Well, I'm fortunate to be one of my jobs. I was the resident conductor of the Colorado Symphony, and they do a pretty extensive summer season out at Red Rocks, which is, if you've never been there, it's one of the great summer venues in all the country, in all the world, really. And they are actually very proactive about creating concerts. So because I had worked with them, and because I had, I kind of a background in orchestration at the time, I've gotten introduced to different artists through them. And as you work with one artist and it goes well, then the next artist can say, hey, my people at the Colorado Symphony pitch me, and they say, well, what else has he done? And they share the stuff, and then they say, okay, well, let's give him a shot. And it just goes step by step. I never expected to be orchestrating with, Jack Black, Kyle Gass, and Weird Al Yankovic, but that's where it's led, and I credit the guys at the Colorado Symphony for making that happen, really.
That's incredible.
Because between us, I have to, you should know, not everybody in the classical world is like kicking their heels that Scott O'Neill's writing for Tenacious D. We have a portion of our audience that's, when they hear it, they're like, oh, you aren't going to perform that, are you? Oh, yes, we are.
I love it.
That's great.
So, again, credit to the Colorado Symphony for, hey, we want to perform to our audience. And what does our audience like to listen to? Well, this is it.
Yeah.
And being from Colorado, I have to say, I think the next step is the South Park guys, because come on, they're from here. We've talked about we need to do a live version of Team America USA.
Yes. Oh my God.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Please make that happen.
Right after Weird Al Yankovic and Tenacious D, it's the next logical step, right?
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
Book of Mormon, whatever it is, bring it on. We'll do it.
Yeah, or South Park movie. Like, they've got so much great music. Even Cannibal, they've got so much great music. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, so we're in that world now.
So I want to dive in a little bit on the process with Al. How many songs did you work on? What was the process like?
Okay, so the stuff that's from previous, he did a concert out at the Hollywood Bowl, I believe, and another great orchestrator by the name of Sean O'Loughlin. I love the fact that we're both Irish. He did those charts, but he has he always starts the concert with the tune Fun Zone, and he thought, well, why not have the orchestra play that instead of the band? So so he gave that to me to be done. He's like I said, he's doing some of the obviously the old classics, Fat, Unplugged medley, and Tacky, which I was like, oh, I so wanted to do Tacky, but it was already done, already taken. Word Crimes too. If I have to say, of all the stuff I've heard him do, some of the more modern ones, Word Crimes has to be one of the most brilliant. So I was sad to miss out on that, but I did get to do Biggest Ball of Twine in Minnesota, which I think is
love that song.
And for the orchestrator, that's like field day. And if you've got a sense of humor, then all right, there's stuff you can do here. I also did One More Minute, Harvey the Wonder Hamster, one of my favorites, Jurassic Park.
Yes. I love all these songs.
Weasel Stomping Day, which is an absolute hoot. You Don't Love Me Anymore. Don't download this song. And what actually is the other one that I think is just brilliant on his part, I was honored to work on it, was Jackson Park Express.
Yes, such an amazing song. Dave and I were at the show last tour where he played that for the first time ever on stage, and it was such an amazing song to hear live. I can't wait to hear it with the full orchestra.
Yeah, you and me both. I don't know. I actually told him, like the part where he talks about homeschooling, and protect them from the evils of the world, like trigonometry and prime numbers.
Right.
Like the way he wrote that, I remember the first time hearing it. Being a pretty hardcore musician where I'm listening to orchestration and harmony, and I didn't really catch the words the first time, and I got a little verklempt the first time because I'm just like the harmonic progression and the way he creates that climax. I was like, oh my god, this is so beautiful. And then when wait, what did he say back there? He's protecting them from what? He's protecting them from trigonometry. Oh, it's a homeschool. Oh, okay, I get it. But yeah, so that's the stuff I wrote, and the others I think are all written by Sean O'Loughlin. But it was a lot to do, and it was great to work with him on it.
Is it challenging to kind of write charts for songs that have vocals and funny, lyrics in them?
That is exactly, you nailed it. Because as an orchestrator, I try to be as diverse as possible and write in any style. Obviously, if I'm going to do everything from Christmas music to jazz, funk, and more locally, and the stuff that I do by myself, I'm a big fan of Pat Metheny. So doing very sophisticated, jazz music, and if anything, I like Respighi and Strauss, this big, massive, rich stuff. You better stay out of the way if you want Al's words to be understood, because they are so integral,
Right.
So yeah, that's the big thing, is how do you write something that is meaningful for the orchestra to play, but doesn't get in the way? And that was constantly the question when I was writing was, is this supporting the words? Is this staying out of the way? Is this keeping the clarity that his music needs? That's exactly the challenge. And it was a several month process of me trying to find the ways of, okay, I've got, it's too thick there, I got to take it out, and then later saying, okay, he's understood, but I can do this, and it's still, still should work. So, that is the number one prime directive is, don't get in Al's way. Well, especially when, as one of the things I love about his humor that's, and this is true about a lot of the greatest comedians, is the setup is long, and you believe, like, in every phrase, you think this is serious, and it turns on one word often near the end, and boy, you better not get in the way of that word, because it's just that's where the great humor is. So
right.
I had a great respect for the way he does that. When it comes to that type of lyrics, being able to turn the meaning and that quick, and which makes it so funny, I don't know anyone who can do it the way he can. So
he's a true original.
Yeah. When I think about the impact he's having, years ago I did a show with Victor Borge, who is big in the classical humor world, mm-hmm. And I remember talking backstage with his son, where it was a very touching moment where we were just discussing how the stuff that Victor Borge does or did was so unique, and he said, so when my father passes, who's going to carry this on? Who could possibly do this? And we both kind of had that moment where we realized he's it. And when he decides to stop or has to stop, there's going to be this big vacuum, this big loss. And I feel the same with Al, that, I don't know if anyone can do what he does. So it's kind of a big deal that, the guys who lived in Chicago when Michael Jordan was playing, I hope they realized how special it was, and they really cherished it, because when it's over, it's not like, oh, well, we'll just move on to the next guy. No, this was special. So
yeah, it's never quite the same with someone else when you have a true pioneer who really invents a genre and perfects a genre. Like Al.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of saying it. This guy has done, paid his dues, done his homework, and when you hear the latest stuff like Tacky or Word Crimes, and as I say, Jackson Park Express, if you have fans that haven't heard this, I would say to any Weird Al Yankovic fan, if you haven't heard Jackson Park Express, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to. This is brilliant, brilliant writing.
Yeah. I would love for you to speak on the process. You mentioned it was a couple months working with Al. What was the process like working on these orchestrations?
Well, I gotta say, so he's incredibly organized. So the first thing was that he sent me a several-page email talking about, okay, this is how the show's gonna run. This is the first piece, and fun zone. It's quick, and how much could there be to, he wrote a couple paragraphs on this is what I really hear for this, and he talks about how, because it's clear everything he's doing is a very crystal clear idea of the presentation he wants to make to the audience. Everything that I did that and it was nice because after we got a few pieces in, I kind of got a sense for what he liked and didn't like. But at the beginning, there's a lot of kind of feeling each other out.
Yeah.
It was clear everything he had, that he wanted changed. There was a reason that had to do with the audience expects this, and I want to make sure that my audience, understands this, or that hey, you did this, and they might hear this as wrong because it doesn't match the album. So you can tell he really cares about his fans. And so I got this long, email with pretty good detail about what he wanted for all the charts I'd be writing. And, some of them he'd tell me tacky. It was simple as saying, we'll be using the charts from the Hollywood Bowl show for this. I was like, oh no. So my thing was to start with his list and notes, and then just for me, just listen and look, because things like Jackson Park Express, I didn't know that well, so I had to listen over and over again. It's one of those things where once you've got it in your bones, then the answers come naturally. But I spent a fair amount of time just listening to his music and listening to his other stuff, just to kind of make sure. And that's when you try to cover the stuff he's done over the years and realize the diversity of his his output, you get a real respect for, wow, this guy can do just about anything.
He can do anything and do it well.
Yeah,
and be funny.
It's incredible. Yeah. Again, who does that?
Nobody.
Yeah, someone who's as dedicated. Yeah, someone who's as you'd have to have. It's like I talk to people about Mozart. Where what if you had the most brilliant, most talented, hardest working musician ever born, and he happened to be born into a family where his father was grooming him for that from the time he was a little boy. Well, you get Mozart,
right?
And Al, his intelligence, his talent, his genius, all focused into his background. If you were missing one of those elements, then he wouldn't be the guy he is today. But because so much of this was so focused on a clear vision he had, well, we're lucky to get what he's got. So after I've got my mind around all this stuff, I would write a new chart for, I would do it on my own little notation program, which when I play it back, it sounds like synthesized orchestra, which it's okay, but it's the kind of stuff in the business where if you're sending something to a movie producer or another musician, they get the idea, but it's not nearly it's not ready to be released. So I would some of them, like Fun Zone, obviously I just sent him, but other stuff I would literally put what he sang over top of it so he could hear, hey, this is how it's going to fit together, and it'll all sound so that it gives them a pretty clear idea of, hey, I like this, I don't like this. You kind of overbalance this, you can get into some good details, like, is this too heavy? You can talk about balances, but and the first one, he had a number of comments. Hey, this is the way I hear this. I don't do you really think you ought to do this with the percussion? What if you tried this? Blah blah blah. And I gotta say, he's not just tough, but he's like the nicest guy you'd ever hope to work with, because like all of his feedback was, well, I've got to say something, so here it is, and but as I got to figure out what he liked and didn't, then the last few got down to the point where it was just like I kind of knew I could anticipate, so I only put in the stuff that I knew was going to be like, yeah, this is what he wants. And fortunately, by the end, after like 9 of them, I think I wrote, yeah, you kind of figure it out. But yeah, it's so it was that kind of back and forth, and then there were a couple times I'd say, I don't know, we had 4 or 5 phone calls where we just for me, as you could tell when I was talking to you guys, if I can just hear the way you talk and hear what you're about, yeah, I get a sense for who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I still haven't met him in person.
Oh wow! So Red Rocks will be
exciting.
the first time.
It'll be the first time, so we know each other well, but it's almost like pen pals or Facebook friends, yeah. So I'm looking forward to it, but yeah, it once you get into the weeds of, okay, this is the chart, let me play this for you, and it was nice because he's the musician you would expect him to be. So I could sit down and, play stuff and talk music theory and talk balances and orchestration. And he's completely comfortable, because you can tell in some ways, all the guys I work with, like Bela Fleck, if he wanted to, he could orchestrate this stuff himself. He's looking for someone with a certain imagination this way and who has the time to do this, who can really dedicate their sole attention to making this the best it can be. And the same thing's true for Alec. I got the sense that, he has a clear enough idea of what he wants that if he wanted to, he could probably do it himself. It was just, it was a good feeling of just working with a colleague that, doesn't have a crazy ego about this stuff, isn't going to be, difficult to work with, is just trying to get the best product. And why? Because he really cares about his fans.
Right.
So it couldn't have been a better, nicer, funner project to work on. I loved it from the word go.
I'm curious about the time frame of it. When did the project start?
So I got alerted to it the end of last summer. He sent his email. I can actually have it. Last August 24th.
Wow. Right before the star ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously he was busy at the time, but
a little busy that week.
But obviously from the email he sent me, he didn't let that deter him. And so from August 24th, I was at the time working on several other projects, and so I probably spent the first 2 months just listening to the music over and over again. And then late November, I started sending him charts to, start checking out. And it was funny. He's a real guy. There was one weekend where he said, hey, I'm going to be a little bit spot. Because he's also incredibly responsive. You send him an email, you're going to get something in within 24 hours.
Wow.
He's kind of Johnny on the spot. There was one time I just thought, wow, this is a real guy, when he said, hey, I'm going to be a little busy this weekend. The in-laws are in town for the weekend, so I'm going to be showing them around. I was like, how cool would that be to be in there? Hey, I'm going to go into LA and Al Yankovic's going to show me around town. Well, he did marry my daughter, so So then the big thing, it was the real push was the end of January, early February, and it's a couple months out from the point where they need to start sending the stuff to orchestras. But this is where I have to, once I have the charts done, so there's the auditory side where Al and I are working on what it's supposed to sound like. Once that's done, now the other big part of my job is to, be able to print it and, and this is a whole nother realm of how do you write it so that people can read it down and it just sounds right. Um,
Do the orchestras
and
get a point of reference? Like, do they get those comps that you sent to Al?
I sure hope so. I believe they do, and I'm writing the score so that the conductor shouldn't need anything but what I'm writing to completely fill him in. This is how it should sound. Um, and making sure the parts are edited. Pieces like, Jackson Park Express and Biggest Ball of Twine in Minnesota is going to have page turns, and making sure that the page turns this isn't like studio stuff where, hey, we're going to do this in bits and pieces. No, once you start, so all that editing has to be done, and then I send it to his librarian, who then does all the hard copy. We're going to print each page, make sure it looks right, bind them, put them into sets, send them to orchestras. We're going to have 3 different sets because you've probably seen his tour schedule. You can't just send one set of parts out, because you're performing with one group and you're going to be performing with another one tomorrow night.
Yep.
And that group had to have music. So I don't know how many sets they made of this stuff, but they sent it to all these different orchestras. And I'm trying to remember, it was just a few weeks ago I got a notice, hey, this one song we start, just to give the singers their pitches, the band plays 2 pickup notes into the downbeat that you've written. And the truth is, no one in the orchestra is playing that, but because we want it to go as flawless as possible, we took the time to reprint all the parts so that there were 2 more rests in the players' parts before they came in, and the conductor had that little lick that the piano and guitar played, so that they would, again, you're trying to troubleshoot this so nothing goes wrong, but it's the kind of detail that you can tell Al gets because he's done a lot of live performances. But when it came up, hey, we need to make this change at the last minute, you could tell everybody on his team was like, okay, how do we get this done fast? Send this to Scott. Scott's got it done. I'm going to send it to the librarians. Librarians were on it. And it's just it's an honor to be on a team that nobody's complaining, no one's saying, is it really necessary? You know what, we've already mailed sets or anything like that. No, it's just, if it's going to be as good as possible, it has to be fixed, so we're doing it now. Done. All the energy's moving that direction. It just feels good. So yeah, and I will say the one where I tested to see just how far can I go, Biggest Ball of Twine in Minnesota. For a guy like me, where I've done a lot of this, and I think I did a version of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, where the orchestra basically comments, creates all the musical background songs for, as the narrator's talking about this, you hear that in the orchestra, and he when he takes off in his sleigh, you hear this Superman sounding music, and it's. So I thought, when we do Biggest Ball of Twine in Minnesota, and he talks about the DeSoto, the old car,
Right? Yes.
I thought, dude, there has to be a car horn in the orchestra. So I put a and you could tell that it was kind of testing to see, okay, this wasn't in the original, but if you're gonna have an orchestra back there and you really want to justify him, you kind of gotta let him do that. So I put it in, and it was funny, the notes that he wrote back, you could tell were kind of stream of consciousness, where he's typing as he's listening, and then there's this ... Oh, car horn, I get it. All right. So that was one of the, okay, let's see, how far can I push this? Because one of the big things was that, as an orchestrator and especially as an arranger, we're often expected, hey, don't just take this, if you've got some new harmony that you hear this building in a different way, do it. Show your creativity. Don't just transcribe it. Well, the thing is, there were times where I'd do that, and he'd say, I get why you're doing this, but I think my fans are going to hear it as being wrong. So, finding that edge where, hey, I've added a little cluster here that it kind of fits with what orchestras do. And then there's the fine line between, I think that's not going to be what my fans want to hear. Could you make that one a little bit more like the album? And, that was a constant, once I realized where's the breaking point. Okay, so let's play that line, and anything way over it, don't waste your or his time on it. So.
Right.
But he was clear and consistent, and it was obvious that everything he was doing was why? Because I want my audience to really love what we do. And I was like, well, all right, I'm with you.
And which one of these charts that you put together was the most challenging for you?
They all have their different. I'll say so. So like One More Minute, he was like, be creative there. So the further it gets from transcription, the more it gets into like composition. So the stuff that I wrote as the background stuff, it's got all new descant lines, and in some ways that was challenging just because you could improvise something for him to sing over, but is it the best thing? And you're always questioning it. So that one took a lot of time just because it was more composition. Jurassic Park was actually challenging because it's a takeoff on MacArthur Park that it was recorded with orchestra, but it had kind of a jazz orchestra feel to it. So when you're getting to the you're getting to those instrumental sections,
right?
There were a number of versions recorded, and as soon as I had one that I figured, I know how to do that, I would listen to another one and wait, the trombones are doing something cool there. Okay, they've got like 5 trombones playing that. We don't have 5 trombones in the orchestra. So how do I do that? So that was a challenge. I remember taking taking a lot of time because I keep finding new versions that had, because if I get a chance to write it, I'm throwing the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah.
If I've got, hey, there's this other part that if you listen to what the flute does, and okay, now everyone's playing loud. Now can you listen in clearly enough and separate the sounds to hear only the flute? Yeah, good luck with that. It's not what your ear's drawn to. But when you figure out, if I do it this way, it's going to have this certain character. Let's do that. So Jurassic Park was one of them, but I would say in just about every way, partially because Jackson Park Express is, so epic. I mean, it's long. There's a lot of style and character changes in it, and partially because I don't know. There's something about that, and I told him, I said, of all the stuff I've worked on so far, I am loving working on Jackson Park Express. And he even confided to me, he said, I'm glad to hear you say that. It's one of my favorites, and it's pretty much the reason we decided to do this tour with orchestra. He said, because I wanted to hear what this would sound like with a full orchestra. And I'm like, well, and when you realize it means that much to him, well, now there's added weight on that.
Yep.
And trying to get the, let me see if I can put it. You'd love the quote that because I was trying to make sure it was what he wanted, and so I said I did this, I hope you like it, I'm not sure whatever, but and all he typed back was, it sounds pretty stinking majestic to me. And I was like, well, all right, well, if Al Yankovic can call what you do stinking majestic, that's about as good a compliment as I could hope for on this. So, like I said, it's the kind of stuff that I love, that kind of grandiose, big cinematic, multicolor, kind of sound. And when you get to the top of Jackson Park Express, it was like, oh, let me show you what the orchestra can do with this. Because, it's not just it's not just transcribing, hey, how would the orchestra play this? No, I'm going to put a big swirl down in the harp. It's going to turn into an arpeggio that kind of reaches up into the orchestra and creates this kind of mountain of a crescendo. And yeah. So that, again, I keep going back to Jackson Park Express, but yeah, that's pretty. I think that's pretty. That's where it's at. When we do the concert, I guarantee that's the one. And that big climax rock, I'm probably gonna get all verklempt again.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to hearing Jackson Park Express.
Yes. I've got an interesting question. I don't know if there's a real answer to it. But I can't speak for Dave or other Weird Al fans, but I'm not someone who has been to a lot of orchestral shows. What advice do you have for audience members to really get the most out of these concerts?
Well, first of all, don't feel like, when we do our concerts, one of the big things I feel bad for people who are showing up and haven't grown up in the culture is there's this worry about, well, how do I act? And, they're doing a symphony. I've heard this thing, you're not supposed to clap between movements. How am I supposed to know when the movements are done? And when's the piece really done? Because the worst thing they do is get to the end of the piece and people don't realize it's over, and then the conductor has to turn around and that's it. It kind of kills it. So the big thing I'd say is go to it like you would go to any concert. Enjoy yourself. Don't feel like, don't feel like you have to fit into the classical world. Instead, the orchestra, we're trying to make sure we fit into your world because, it's entertainment. It's fun. We're all there to, just have a good time. So Red Rocks is very, it's in Colorado. And I don't know if you've heard about Colorado, but it's a pretty, they respect your rights to enjoy yourself. Let's just say that. So enjoy yourself. Have it. You can have a drink if you want. Other stuff is frowned on in public, but I don't think anybody's gonna. I've never seen anyone try to stop anybody. So I can't. Obviously, I'm kind of skirting the issue, but it goes that far as to, hey, people who want to do that, and it's part of the game, and we get it. Big thing is just, I don't know, when you see how Al does his live shows, just be ready for anything, because this guy brings it. I don't know how he does what he does, like, night after night, over and over again. He's got to be in incredible shape. Let's just say that.
67 shows this tour. I can't believe it.
Oh my God! And some of them are like, okay, one city on this day, another city that's not next door tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah, that's. There used to be this phrase. I think it started with James Brown, the hardest working man in show business. I guarantee, if you look at the span of his career, how much he's put out and how he works on his live concerts, I think you could say Weird Al is the hardest working man in show business.
Hands down.
Show me anyone else who's got the span of career that he does and does his shows the way he does them. Yeah, so the whole thing about how do we enjoy the orchestra concert? Don't worry about the orchestra. Just we're going to take hopefully whatever your expectations were for a rock show and just turn them up a notch and make it like almost cinematically epic. So that's on us. That's not on you.
Yeah, that's all great advice. Thank you, Scott. The show that I'm looking most forward to is the show that you will be conducting at the Red Rocks show. I will be there. I've
You and me both. It's going to be
Yeah.
that. I'm so lucky. The week before is when we do the Tenacious D concert.
Wow.
So that's going to be like the best week of my summer for sure.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah. Well, how can you keep that pitch, that high level of, no, you're not going to. It can be different, but it's not going to be as, Jack Black, Kyle Gass, and Weird Al Yankovic in a week. Yeah, that's a pretty good highlight. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like you. I can't wait for that. It's gonna be epic. I've actually got. So this is also to tell you. My father was a high school band director. My mom was a school teacher. So they respect what I do, but they didn't really go to a lot of classical concerts. And my family, they think it's cool what I'm doing, but when they found out I was doing a show with Al Yankovic, my family is coming out from Ohio
Wow.
to see the Al Yankovic concert.
Wow.
So that tells you, even within my family, this is the biggest deal. I've performed with Itzhak Perlman, who's he? Steve Vai, what's that? Bela Fleck, okay, whatever. Al Yankovic, the Al Yankovic, we're gonna be there, So there's that.
Yeah, I think Red Rock is the place to be this summer, definitely.
Yeah,
So
we're
what-
so lucky to have that here in Colorado. It's epic.
Yeah, for somebody who's never been there, can you kind of describe what Red Rocks is and the experience?
Yeah, so there are these two huge, I mean, when I say huge, I mean like, 40-story, length rocks that are angled, that happen to be almost parallel in the earth. And so what they did was they dug out the space between them, and it turns out you can fit 9,000 people in between them.
Wow.
And it was part of the I think it was part of the New Deal way back when they're trying to get people back to work in the United States. It was built by the federal government as kind of like a public works program. And the truth is, that's the only way you could do something this large. And they for the evening concerts, they're going to have the sides of the stones lit up. So it's kind of like the Grand Canyon of music, You're going to be in this huge natural amphitheater with a stage down in front. They've got screens because, let's face it, if you're at the top, I would say 70 yards away, 50 yards away. So it's kind of like being in a stadium watching a football game. Yeah, it kind of is nice to have that. They have screens on the side that, amplify everything so you can see it, in real life, but you've also got large screens at the side that show you the detail. And, this is, for everybody from the Beatles on, this was like the place to perform. And it's great. Like, you go backstage, they have pictures of all the artists who have performed there, and it's everybody. Like, if you're anybody, you've performed at Red Rocks. So it's this natural amphitheater that only God could have made. And I just, whatever concert, whatever music you love, go perform it at Red Rocks in summer in Colorado, and it's going to make it that much more special. It's like nothing else in the world.
Wow, sounds amazing.
I gotta find
We
a
are
way
so
to get out
lucky.
there. I'm so jealous.
So lucky. I told the Colorado Symphony, I think they do 4 or 5 shows there a year, and I'm like, do you realize there are artists that, like, this is their dream to perform at Red Rocks, and you guys do it 4 or 5 times a year. You realize how lucky we are? So, well, we're blessed. I can only be grateful.
That's amazing.
And I think this will be Weird Al Yankovic's first time at Red Rocks, won't it?
As far as I know,
As far
I think
as I
it's
know,
his first time there. Yeah.
Well, this is kind of like his. Hey, he's checking off the bucket list, right? He's got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Next, he's going to check off, I've performed at Red Rocks. You know, there aren't that many things left to do. You know, so that shows his career has, look, he's done what you can do, and let's celebrate him.
That's true.
I think the next thing on the bucket list would be being a guest on Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast. I think that's really the only place left
there
to
it
go.
is. They've gone as far as they can go. Wait, there's the podcast.
Scott, this was such a pleasure to talk to you. Some really amazing insight into the process and of course your career. Where can we follow you? Do you have a social media channel that we can get updates?
Great. So this is my challenge: is that like this summer between Bela Fleck, Tenacious D, and Weird Al Yankovic, that's a lot of work. So
yeah.
So I've got a Scott O'Neill Music is it .com or .org? I'm sorry. That's the problem. I don't spend as much. I'm on Facebook, but people can find just Scott O'Neill, and you can tell the guy from Colorado with the conductor avatar. That'd be me. But I've been so busy working. My next step, Scott O'Neill's next step is to get someone to take care of his media for him, because like I did a TED talk. I wrote music for a company where I took their name and I turned it into music. People could YouTube that, and if you go to my Scott O'Neill Music, there's a link there as well. But that after I get all the music done, because let's face it, this needs my that's the other thing I don't think people realize. When you start writing for Weird Al Yankovic, man, whatever else you were doing, it kind of goes away, because
not quite as
it
important.
needs your undivided attention for months. So when you come out, it's funny. People see where I live and they're like, wow, this is pretty rustic. This is pretty, Spartan. That's right. Because I can't afford any distractions. So I got to up my electronic media game, but that's the best way to find me for now.
Excellent. Well, we would rather you work on Weird Al stuff than spend your time right. on the internet, so we appreciate that.
Well, awesome. That's the one thing. It's one of those. I remember telling someone, look, if you want greatness, you have to give up mediocrity. Right. And all the stuff that I used to do that I thought was fun, when you start working with cats this serious, you know what? The game is on. No more messing around. You got to give that stuff up and I don't think a lot of people today really understand what undivided attention for months means. It means I don't do anything else. We're so used to being distracted. So I've gotten really good at not being distracted. So I feel lucky to get to talk to you guys about it, because otherwise no one would understand.
Well, I hope anyone who can will make it out to your Red Rock shows with Bela Fleck and Tenacious D and Weird Al. It sounds like it's going to be just an amazing summer of concerts at Red Rocks.
Oh, I can't wait, and thanks for letting people know about it.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us.
My honor. Thanks for having me on. I can check this off my bucket list now.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Take good care.
Dave, I loved that interview. I felt like we really got a lot of great information out of Scott. Of course, a lot of spoilers for anybody who doesn't want to know the songs on the upcoming tour.
Well, too late now, because we just listened to the interview.
Unless they skipped ahead.
But yeah, that was such an incredible, amazing, insightful interview. I was so honored that we got to talk to Scott. He's just an incredible person. I learned so much.
he was really a blast to talk to. So I really hope I get to make it out to the Red Rock show and see him perform. And I wish I lived closer so I could check him out doing the Tenacious D one. How cool
Oh,
is
I
that?
know. How awesome is that going to be? Tenacious D in the Red Rocks. Oh man, he made me so jealous when he brought that up.
I mean, he's
But I'm-
essentially like he's living like my dream of performing with both Tenacious D and Weird Al like in the same month.
I know. Yeah, what a dream, right? So, yeah, you can catch Scott this summer at Red Rocks for Tenacious D and, of course, Weird Al. I will be at the Weird Al one. I'm hoping Ethan comes and joins me.
And that's on August 1st.
And speaking of concerts, as this podcast is broadcasting, I am in Florida right now for Weird Al's concerts.
That's right. You're hitting a bunch of shows. You're hitting like the first 5 shows.
First 5 shows, yeah.
Amazing.
And I will be doing little mini reviews. We're going to call them centimeters. They're going to be posted up. They're going to be posted up as soon as I get done with the concert, as soon as I find some quiet space. I'm going to record them. I'm going to send them off to Frank. He's going to edit them together.
Minimally.
Yeah, as quickly as possible. He'll probably slap the theme song on and put them out there.
I can't wait. And next week, super excited, we are going to be talking to the great MC Lars.
Yeah, on the debut of his newest album, The Dewey Decibel System.
Yes, and that actually comes out on June 7th. So be sure you pre-order that or go grab that this week and it comes out. And you're going to love that interview we did with him.
Yeah, what a credible guy. Yeah.
Really? Oh my God. Yeah.
So thank you to our listeners. And if you enjoy this podcast, please, we ask you, please subscribe. If you also enjoy this podcast, we're coming down to the last couple days on our Indiegogo. We would love your support financially to help us keep this podcast going. Your contributions go towards our podcast hosting and many other perks.
We have a lot of cool things that we're working on that we can't even talk about, and the money goes directly to that. And that includes, we want to be able to do more giveaways and stuff for people. So we're not just adding more solid gold Humvees to our collections, although we are getting the solid gold Humvees. That is part of it. No, the $2,000 directly. I mean, we're happy to cover the expenses for the podcast, but that's why we put out the Indiegogo. We figured some people might want to get some cool stickers and magnets and fun little bonus stuff that we've been sending out. So if you have a couple bucks, we would love the support.
Yeah, you can reach us at contribute.2000inch.com.
And that will bring you right to Indiegogo. And of course, if you are looking for all things Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast, you can check out 2000inch.com. And on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we are at 2000inch.
That was Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast, episode 5-inch.
It sounds pretty stinking majestic to me. Ba-bum, 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 ba-da-da.